Hey everyone, Gill Gross here, and it is time for another mailbag, where I answer your questions, hot takes, observations, and ultimately your comments about tennis or anything else post-Roland Garros 2025. This is how we wrap up the coverage. This is how we close the book each and every time. It is always a blast. I'm not sure exactly how long I'll go, but I do know there won't be any edits because I don't got time for that today. So my mistakes are going in the show. Isn't that great, everybody? Let's just get right into it. I have nothing to say. Let's do it. First one is from member Henry. You can become a member by hitting the join button, contribute $2 a month to the channel. It goes a long way, and I appreciate the support. I also will give you priority in the mailbag. Henry says, random stat, but are you surprised that Nadal and Djokovic only played 3 5-set matches across all 60 of their matches, and that Sinner and Alcaraz have played 3 in their careers? Yes, I am surprised by that crazy stat. I would have never guessed that. That is wild. If you were to force me to make a theory out of it, and my confidence is not 100% here, but if you're going to say, Gil, explain this, I would just say that Carlos is much more prone to ups and downs within a match than Novak or Rafa. Novak and Rafa being pretty much a 10 out of 10 in terms of their focus and consistency in a typical match, especially at a major. And Alcaraz can be one player for a stretch of 20 minutes, another player for another stretch of 20 minutes, and maybe that creates a little bit a higher likelihood that he's going to play a long match. That said, Alcaraz did a really good job throughout clay court season of maintaining his highest level or something close to it. I think he said after the Rome final, it was a hilarious quote. He was like, I'm proud that I didn't do the roller coaster this time. So funny. But I'd say in the final, if you're going to point to a moment, like, okay, let's grab an example from the latest 5-setter that Sinner and Alcaraz played. Maybe you would go to the end of the first set, start of the second. That 4-5 service game in the first set, I didn't talk about it on Monday Match Analysis because, I wasn't going to drill down into every single moment that mattered. But had Sinner won the match, this would have mattered. 4-5 service game in the opening set, Alcaraz misses 3 first balls. And they were all good returns by Yannick. None of them were great returns. None of them should have created errors necessarily. And it was just a sloppy service game. So it's just one example compared to what we saw at other portions of the net where Alcaraz was just razor sharp and not giving away anything. So maybe that's the reason. But hey, that's really interesting. And it could be a coincidence or it could be something that I'm not thinking of. Next one is from the Discord from ZHD. Hi, Gil. Thank you for what you're doing. My question, can Djokovic reinvent himself once more at 38 plus years of age with less physicality, more variety, even more focus on fine-tuning the serve, and pick off number 25 with guile over grind? Is the all-court reinvention possible, or is his game too aerobic at its core? This is a great question. I really think that Djokovic he's doing the thing. He is doing what you are explaining and asking if he can do. He has become the most precise server on tour, maybe other than a few guys. But he is literally elite in terms of his serve accuracy. His forehand has gone from something that people don't regard as a weapon to one of the more deadly forehands that you'll see. And it still doesn't look as big as it really is because it's pretty flat, maybe because Novak doesn't grunt, maybe it's because his technique doesn't look as violent as some, but it comes off big and fast, and he's very aggressive on it. I talked about it in the analysis with Zverev. It's the main thing I talked about it. His game plan displayed a absolute refusal to engage in long physical rallies with Zverev. You have to do it maybe once in a while. It's not like you can avoid it altogether, but like point in, point out, Novak was just not going to do it. And there have been matches like against Medvedev in particular where he's net rushing a ton. So I just think he's already doing it. Can he take it even further? I mean, I have like a pipe dream. It's like a fantasy imagination. I'd love to know how well Novak can do at Wimbledon just serve and volleying, because I think he's actually become really good at it. And I'm kind of curious. I'd be curious to see it. But that's more of a thought experiment than anything. I really think Novak has maximized in this respect. He's doing everything he can. From Naloon, I just want to point out that Alcaraz and Sinner take far less time to serve and take fewer pauses than Novak and Rafa, and that should be taken into account when talking about the match duration. Yeah, I agree. I don't know exactly how much that accounts for if you compare it to, let's say, an Australian Open 2012, which ended up being considerably longer than the Sinner-Alcaraz RG final. But yeah, how crazy is it that neither of them went to the bathroom? I told my girlfriend that. She was kind of fascinated by it. And I said, I promise, if I get a chance to talk to Carlos or Yannick in an interview setting, I don't mean casually chat, that wouldn't happen. But if I get to interview them and if I have like more than one question, I might ask about that because I'm kind of fascinated. How is that possible? Like, they're hydrating like crazy and not going to the bathroom. Maybe I wouldn't ask about that. I don't know. I'm just really curious about it. I do think it's a positive. It's a positive for the viewing experience as a whole. Pace of play is a good thing. At the same time, players who take their time and use the entire serve clock, and Djokovic is usually in that category, Rafa always in that category, I completely understand why they do it. They want to maximize their lung capacity before every single point, and that makes a whole lot of sense. But for Alcaraz and Sinner, that doesn't seem to be quite as much of a priority. And in fairness, they're playing much more aggressive styles. They're certainly playing the lung-busting rallies. It's definitely happening, but probably not quite as often. From Nithin Sum, do you think Big Three might actually be a pattern in men's tennis going forward? From the time Nadal-Federer started, it started looking like two men will dominate the tennis world, but then a third arrived, and now we are witnessing the same pattern, and most likely another player will join the current two best players. The reason I say this might be a pattern, barring injuries, is because the mental aspect of tennis is the key distinguishing factor in addition to the skill, and this seems to be held by only a few players during an average phase of a tennis player's career. Yeah, I'm not a huge believer in separating mental, physical, technical, and trying to like make a hierarchy out of them. But that's kind of besides the point when it comes to the question. You're saying, is there a pattern in tennis where there are three players who dominate? I don't think the number is necessarily three. I think it can be two for an era, and I think it can be potentially four for an era. But I do think the idea that there's not going to be a chaos period very often, like in tennis history, especially men's tennis, but women's tennis largely as well. You can only point to a few moments where it was like this. For the most part, there aren't a lot of chaos eras where you have a list of 12 people who might win the major. And I do believe the reason for that is because there's just not a lot of luck in tennis. There's a lot of luck in other sports. Who gets injured, who stays healthy. there's a little bit more of that. There's officiating. There's bad bounces, fluky stuff that happens in terms of just kind of like lucky stuff, right? There's a lot more luck involved in other sports, but with tennis, because it's one-on-one, because officiating doesn't often come into play, because there's a really large sample size of points that you're playing one-on-one, so it's talent versus talent, and you're gonna run it back like 250 times or something like that. Usually the better player wins. So when two players are close in level, you might get tiny margins, and then you have some variance. And I'm not saying it's not just luck, it's also variance. I should have qualified that. So you have a lot of situations in other sports where it's like, okay, if these two teams play 10 times, one is going to win 6 times, the other is going to win 4 times. I'll tell you, that's not really the case in tennis for Jannik Sinner versus, sorry for the stripe, Brandon Nakashima. I just tried to pick a player who's probably like the 30th best in the world. There's not a lot of variance. Jannik's winning 9 times, if not 10, if they play 10 times. And that's because the nature of the sport just doesn't really facilitate a ton of fluky results. Usually, better wins. And that is why you have periods of domination by a few. Best of 5 on the men's side exacerbates it a bit. I also don't subscribe to the argument that it's all about best of 5, and that explains it fully, because if you look at Masters 1000s in the Big 4 era, there weren't a lot of those to go around either. I always say Big 4 for Masters, because Murray won a lot of them. So why wouldn't you say Big 4 when Murray won a ton? I feel like you have to. From Yawn, thoughts on Sabalenka's post-match comments saying Swiatek would have beaten Coco, etc. The Iga comment, of all of the things Aryna said, that's the most head-scratching one to me. Like that for me was such a irrelevant, unnecessary shot at Coco. So in general, let me start here. If I'm Coco, I feel slighted. If I'm a Coco fan, I'm going to spout off. I'm going to feel a certain type of way about what Aryna had to say. There's no doubt about it. As more of a neutral, I had a couple of reactions. My first was, ooh, that's spicy. Like, that might be good for the rivalry. That kind of adds to the popcorn element. Okay, so that was my first reaction as a neutral. Going further past that, what I really found most revealing about all of this is that Aryna Sabalenka falls victim to the same line of thinking that is pervasive across all levels of tennis, probably all around the world, which is that players who hit a lot of winners, have a lot of firepower, and ultimately hit a lot of very impressive shots, they have a superiority complex. They think they are better, and they feel resentment and shame when they lose to players who don't play a similar way and don't hit a lot of great shots. They feel as if when they lose because of their errors, that they only lost because of how they played. And they fail to recognize the truth, which is that the scoreboard never, ever lies about who played better tennis on the day. And usually, there's a certain level of repeatability when the player who might hit more winners loses to the player who's more consistent. Generally, it's not a fluke. Generally, it's because the player who's more consistent happens to be as good, if not a better tennis player than the player who hits a bunch of winners. It's just the player who hits a bunch of winners can't see that. And I believe in a moment of immense pain that Sabalenka was in, and I think everything Coco has said afterwards on her media tour of, look, I'm going to give Aryna a break. I think she was emotional after a loss. It's all spot on. It's all true. But I think in that moment, you did get a window into Sabalenka's mind. Jonathan Stokey has a line that I love. You can find his podcast, Baseline Intelligence. He's one of my favorite tennis coaches on the internet. He says, consistent players call other consistent players solid. Inconsistent players call other consistent players pushers. And usually they harbor some sort of a resentment whenever they lose to consistent players. That's what happened here, I think. Like Sabalenka feels that she's above losing to Coco. She's not above that. It's happened now 5 times in 9 matches, and it usually looks something like that. We were certainly having similar conversations after she lost the U.S. Open final to Coco. Next one from Caleb. Hi, Gil. What do you make of McEnroe's claim that both Sinner and Alcaraz beat prime Nadal on clay? I know we saw a ridiculous level in the final, but Nadal never even let a final go past 4 sets. Thanks for all the great videos throughout the French Open. Knew I was going to get asked about this one. That's for sure. Let me start here, but I'm not going to go very long on the first part of this answer. I don't agree with Johnny Mac. I think that Rafa was he reached a level of refinement in his prime that would have been difficult for Alcaraz and Sinner to contend with. The physicality, the defense, the consistency, combined with the variety, the court craft, the weaponry on the forehand, because everybody goes to the pace and how Alcaraz and Sinner are just hitting a lot bigger than Rafa. And I think for the most part that's true, but I don't know, if you compare the forehand weapons, I think Alcaraz hits his forehand bigger than Rafa, but it's not as reliable. And I think Rafa hits just about as big on the forehand side as Sinner, but Nadal's forehand was a bit more dynamic with his ability to open up angles and find space on the court. So at the end of the day, I'm going to disagree with Johnny Mac. Although I think Alcaraz and Sinner, as they continue to develop, could at some point make a case. What I'm also going to say is that, one, it's not so outrageous. We'll never be able to know what the answer is. And there's no chance that everybody should have been losing their minds about this on social media and talking about it for 2-3 days. At risk of sounding hypocritical that I'm doing it myself, but this is the mailbag, and Caleb got 21 likes. And I do think there's a point worth making here. I know that we're talking about eras close together. I know that Rafa, as recently as 2022, won 2 major titles. I get that. I know that Rafa's prime was only 10, 15 years ago, if you're going to call it ballpark 2008 through 2013. So it hasn't been ages. But does it really make any sense to fast forward 10 years and talk about if player X would beat player Y? Does that make any sense? Because we've seen the data. The average ground stroke speed has gone way up. The average serve speed has gone way up. Science and technology continues to advance. Prize money continues to go up. Players can afford more people on their teams and their camps, although that is not necessarily pertinent for the players we're talking about right now. But you get the point. Everything evolves. So what are we talking about here? Is it a conversation worth having? And ask yourself, if we take the lore out of it and we start talking about players who are ranked like 25 in the world. Like, okay, 2010, I pulled up the rankings. 2010. World number 23 in 2010 was Michael Yodra, the serve and volleying Frenchman, who I really enjoyed watching play. World number 23 today is it I'm looking at the live rankings, so I don't know exactly who it is. Is it Kaboli? It's either Kaboli, Mahach, or Hachinov. So do you think it is worth our time having a conversation? And Yodra ended up being a pretty good example just because the way he plays, it's clearly from a bygone era. Michael Yodra would not exist today, right? So should we talk about if he could beat Mahach? Does that make any sense? I don't think so. I just don't find these specific hypotheticals to be very meaningful, is all. All right, before we get to the next question, I want to tell you about an exciting giveaway just for Monday Match Analysis listeners, brought to you by 10S Tennis Supply. We're giving away some top-tier tennis gear that can seriously level up your practice and court management. Imagine winning a sturdy, easy-to-handle ball hopper that makes collecting balls a breeze, or a coaching aid designed to deliver precise, effective drills. There's also a reliable scorekeeper to keep your matches running smoothly, plus a ball machine accessory that ensures consistent, effortless feeding. And for the courts, a professional quality roller that keeps surfaces smooth and ready for play. To enter, just hit the link in the show notes. It's simple, quick, and you could be the lucky winner of these premium court supplies from 10S. So don't wait, check the show notes, follow that link, and put your name in the hat. Big thanks to 10S Tennis Supply for making this giveaway possible. Good luck, and now back to the mailbag. Here's one from the Discord. Hi, Gill. In your discussion, it's from Drew Bujo. Hi, Gill. In your discussion with Steve, you mentioned 3 players who have the potential to join Sinner and Alcaraz at the top of the game as part of the new Big Three, Menchik, Draper, and Fonseca. I felt Holger Rune was a glaring omission. I don't necessarily expect him to reach the same heights as Sinner and Alcaraz, but given on paper he has accomplished similar things to Draper at a very young age, isn't he also a contender in that mix? Could you elaborate on why you don't consider him a candidate like those other 3 guys? Is it physical/technical limitations you see, off-court chaos/uncertainty with his team, mentality on court, or something else? Thanks, and I love that episode with Steve. Appreciate the kind words here. This is a good question. I guess the reason why I'm no longer, I don't know if when I ever was, but the reason why I am not very anxious to put Rune in the same category as Alcaraz, Sinner, or Jack Draper is because I think there are so many things that he needs to figure out and make better in order for him to get there. And if it were just like one thing, I could get there a lot easier. But for me, the biggest concern is the shot selection, his ability to make consistent and smart choices, point in and point out, based on the situation, incoming ball, his opponent's court position, his court position. He doesn't seem to feel these things. There seems to be such a mental block when it comes to his decision-making. And I think that's item number 1. The other thing would be the fitness and the durability, which I don't trust right now. The other thing would be the lack of one trusty, bona fide weapon. There's not one thing that he does that he can just lean on and rely on. Instead, it has to be sort of this confluence of things and a well-roundedness that is really, really impressive. But I do think it would help out Holger if there were some more straightforward weapons. I mean, the biggest weapons in men's tennis, serve and forehand. Jack's serve is better. Jack's forehand is better. And even if you include things like fitness, consistency as quote-unquote weapons, again, what is Rune a absolute bona fide best of the best group at? What one area of the game? There's one more thing. I would say like the emotional maturity, the management of the team, I'll put that on the list, but that part doesn't concern me as much, frankly. So shot selection, fitness, durability, lack of one reliable attribute that is elite plus and his ability to manage his career as a professional. Those are like all the things that I think he would need to dial in order for me to feel like he can get to top 3 status. And by the way, like, trajectory to me is very meaningful. I'd rather a player like Sinner or Draper have some clear issues that they need to work out, but see everything kind of slowly but surely getting better. Like Jack last year, there was some frustrations, but I was like, hey guys, he was the healthiest year he's ever had. That was the goal. That was what needed to happen. So you can say, oh, Jack is still not at the top of the game. But for me, I'm like, what did I want from him coming into 2024? I wanted health. What did he do? Health. Bang. He's getting better. That's the kind of thing I want to see. That's the kind of thing I've been asking to see for 2-3 years with Rune's decision-making on the court. Next one from Keon. Hi, Gill. Do you think if Carlos and Jannik meet again in the Wimbledon final, their RG match would benefit Carlos more for extra confidence, or Jannik, knowing that clay is his least favorite surface and he still challenged Carlos, and the fact that Wimbledon suits his game very well? Thanks for all the coverage. If you're asking me like mentally, I'd definitely rather be Carlos. Sorry. I mean, should Sinner be proud of himself from a distance that he came back on a surface that challenges him a bit? He's by no means is he not good on clay, or does clay present serious problems? But of all the surfaces, I think because of the movement, clay probably challenges him the most. It's just not saying much because there's not that big a difference with the way Sinner plays. But between coming back, having only the ability to play one tournament in a span of 3 months, and then have to play Roland Garros, so then you're on the precipice of beating Carlos Alcaraz, who had himself a red-hot clay season. Yeah, there are a lot of things to feel good about when it comes to all that, but I think it's all canceled out by the fact that you feel like you didn't come through under pressure, and the next time you're in that kind of situation and you have to finish and you have to close, those thoughts are going to kind of creep into the back of your mind no matter what, and you're going to have to overcome those things. But yeah, it would be way better if Jannik Sinner won match point and he didn't have to deal with all that. And I think that's far more meaningful than him knowing, like, intellectually that there is a lot to be proud of there with what he accomplished. The fact that Wimbledon suits his game very well, that's going to help him. That's going to help him technically, but psychologically, that's not going to do much for him. And honestly, the next win against Alcaraz is not going to be easy for him mentally. From Mateo. Hi, Gil. What do you think about a coach change in Zverev's team? It's clear that despite his abilities, Sasha is not improving when he faces some opponents with Sinner, Alcaraz, and Nole on top of them. Maybe a coach change could help. Well, it hasn't gone very well in the past. Zverev did a trial run with David Ferrer. He did a short run with Juan Carlos Ferrero, and he did a little stint with Ivan Lendl as well. And none of them lasted very long. I believe Ferrero and Lendl had some unkind things to say upon departing the team. So it's hard to say they should go do it again when it hasn't worked. At the same time, the fact that it's never worked when Zverev has tried to bring in outside counsel speaks to something about his rigidity, the way he does his business in some way or another. The fact that it hasn't been very compatible for coaches to come in and do their thing, I don't think is the best of signs. And I said that at the time. This isn't a hindsight is 2020 thing. You're only saying this because Zverev is 28 years old now and still hasn't won a major. I didn't give him an extra year, right? Yeah, he is 28. Yeah, that's not that. Like, if you go back to 2021, I was saying after like Juan Carlos Ferrero said what he had to say, I'm like, this is a really bad sign. Like, this does not bode well for a guy who really needs to make some massive gains and strides in development if he wants to get to where he wants to get to. But ultimately, my thing with Zverev, anything that can change some of the mental juju, for me, would be a good thing. And that's part of what a coach does. They come in and, especially early on in these relationships, they might be able to endow a player with extra confidence, extra belief, the feeling as if something's new and different in a way that might be positive. And all that could provide a spark. And right now, Zverev only has probably a couple years here to find a bit of a spark, find something different, especially in big matches. And I believe a lot of that is psychological. I don't care. Again, people want to point to all the technical flaws that are real. And these are all valid points. But I'm sorry, with my own eyes, I see what happens to Zverev's level when he's up 2-1 in a final. I see the difference in Zverev's level between when he plays these guys at a Masters 1000 versus when he plays them at the end of a slam. You can't tell me I'm not seeing that. I see the difference between him against Djokovic. Like, how is he so much worse as a front runner? How is he's been able to pull off these big wins at the Olympics, at the ATP finals, at Masters 1000s? It's mental. All of these points that people want to make about the technical limitations, they are all true. They are all correct. But so is the other side of it, that he is not maximizing when he needs to maximize because his brain is getting in the way. Long one from member Master Hegel. Something which I think has been insufficiently emphasized by most analysts is the effect of Sinner's serve on the final. I watched the entire match, and my first thought was that his serve was the primary reason for his loss. Sinner was constantly facing break points or being broken because he was seemingly unable to hit any reasonable number of first serves in play. Moreover, many of his missed serves were not even close to the service box. Most of them were long, with some, if I recall properly, almost out of the court entirely. These observations leave me with many questions. Does Sinner need to change his service motion? To my relatively untrained eye, it seemed and has seemed that Sinner almost always hits flat serves. Am I correct? If so, why is this the case? And does this contribute to his low first serve percentage? Why has he consistently served poorly against Alcaraz? My best guess is that Alcaraz is the only player who can consistently win baseline rallies against him, and Sinner goes for more on his serve. I know that in general, his relatively low percentage of first serves in play is balanced out by the very high percentage of first serve points which he wins, but I suspect that the serve itself is still a problem. He can win against everyone else without serving a relatively high percentage. Look at what he did against Djokovic while only serving 51%. But against Alcaraz, his serve is being exposed because Sinner does not enjoy a significant advantage in the rallies. You make a lot of great points here. Yes, Sinner's primary first serve is a flat serve. Yes, I do think he should work on developing some of the other options based on what we've seen. Look at that slice serve. Try to get a real, true slice serve that stays low and cuts right to left. And I don't think he believes enough in the heaviness of his kick serve, where he doesn't want to use it as a first serve. But the way Alcaraz and even Shelton are using the kicker effectively as a change-up first serve is eye-opening. And it's probably something that Jannik needs to look at and think and ponder, hey, could I get some of that? As far as the technique, I'm a little bit less passionate about that, as he went through a long period of time where it was tinker, 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 and he settled on something. And I think at a certain point, you do need to settle on something. And to me, it looks good. I'm not the kind of guy who's going to take relatively world-class technique, put it under a microscope, find the smallest and the finest of details. I'm not at that level when it comes to technique. But for me, it looks really good, and I'm not as quick to say that Jannik should continue to tweak that. But I do think that part of it is approach. That Sinner is so confident in his ability to win second serve points that he feels there's no reason to not go after the first serve. He probably especially feels like he needs to get serve damage against some of the top players, and it causes his percentage to go down. And by the way, not without good reason, Jannik Sinner in the last 52 weeks is the best second serve points won player by far. It's not even my goodness, is he the best? Alcaraz is at 56.7% in second place. Djokovic is at 56.6% in third place. Fritz is at 56.4%. Zverev, 55.4% in fifth. I won't go any further down the list. But I repeat, Alcaraz is second, 56.7%. Sinner's at 58.5%. Like, that 2% is a really big deal. So he is the best player in the world when he has to hit a second serve. That is why he feels liberated to go after the first. Now, what is he in first serve percentage throughout the year? Let's take a look at that. Hold on, I need to control F this. Yeah, so he's like, as far as top 50 players are concerned, he is slightly below average for the top 50, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. He is at 61.2%. I consider that a very appropriate first serve percentage. There are really awesome servers who are higher than that, there's no doubt. And I think it could help him to bump that up. But it's not awful. I'll say that. Maybe he should change the approach a little bit against Alcaraz. Maybe he should focus on making a higher percentage next time around, because whatever he's been doing hasn't been working. And as I've highlighted over and over again recently, he has been under that 61% mark every match they've played in the last 5 matches. Although I believe one match he did hit 62%, which might have been the Indian Wells match last year. Definitely an interesting wrinkle to what's gone on. From Alex. Hi, Gill. Up until 2019, there had only been 3 comebacks from 2 sets in a slam final in the Open era. Since 2020, there have now been 5. Team versus Zverev, US Open 2020. Djokovic versus Tsitsipas, RG 2021. Nadal versus Medvedev, AO 2022. Sinner versus Medvedev, AO 2024, and Alcaraz versus Sinner, RG 2025. Are there any trends in tennis that have allowed for this repeat occurrence, or any commonalities between those matches that you see? Interesting. Another really, really interesting one. The trends in tennis is that the fitness is unbelievable now. And for that reason, a player is not as daunted by the prospects of being down 2 sets to love. But I don't see a lot of commonalities. I actually don't. I more so see differences between these 2 sets to none comebacks. Team versus Zverev was purely a nerves thing. Zverev goes up 2 sets to love, and he's in the driver's seat to win a slam, and he's stricken with nerves. And Team relaxes. Team is like, I'm going to lose. And he relaxes and plays great. Then it goes to a 5th. And again, Zverev serves for it and gets tight. So that's US Open 2020. Djokovic versus Tsitsipas was an interesting one. Look, Steph won the first 2 sets fair and square. If I remember correctly, Tsitsipas got really hot on the forehand, and he kind of dominated with that particular shot. Djokovic wasn't sharp and wasn't finding great ways to get around it and stay out of trouble against it, especially forehand to forehand flat out. But the latter 3 sets of that match were just simply Novak's better than Tsitsipas. He's the better player. There's not much Tsitsipas can do. Novak found his game. He's not about to get tired, and he's not about to lose. That felt like a pretty inevitable comeback. Every single set from the jump felt like Novak took an early lead, one that he wasn't about to surrender. It was a low drama 2-0 comeback, and it did not feel that surprising. And it came down, in my opinion, to Djokovic being the superior player who just happened to go down 2-0. Nadal versus Medvedev AO 2022. That was a physical thing. That was Daniil tried to grind Rafa down, and he did it successfully in the first 2 sets. He was an absolute beast in the long rallies. He literally wouldn't miss. It was insane. He was a ball machine. But Daniil couldn't play that style against Rafa for 3 sets, and he hit a physical wall. They were probably both a little tired. The difference was, in a scenario in which they were both tired, Rafa was much more capable of overcoming that with his weapons and his court craft, and that's how he was able to turn the tables on Medvedev. But it did come down to Daniil's legs. Similar Sinner versus Medvedev. We know what happened there. Daniil came in with tons and tons of miles on the legs. And then he came out against Sinner, and he was like, I can't do anything like I did against Nadal at Australian Open 2022. I need to be aggressive. I'm going to hit my forehand huge. I'm going to come to the net. And Jannik was like, what the heck? Who am I playing right now? This wasn't the scouting report. Also, first major final. Shell-shocked, panicky. Thought Medvedev played great in the first set. I thought Sinner was like mentally not great in the second set because he was like, what the hell is going on? But then Medvedev ran out of gas. Sinner got comfortable. That was another one. It felt inevitable. Like, as soon as you saw the third set break Sinner's way, it didn't take long to be like, oh, Jannik's winning this match. And then Alcaraz versus Sinner, RG 2025. This one doesn't really fit into any of those categories because it was a flat-out tussle, a flat-out war back and forth. And I don't think there was a really clear paradigm shift. I don't think there was a part A, this was happening, part B, this was happening. I thought it was 5 great sets of tennis for the most part. The first 2 happened to go Sinner's way. The last 3 happened to go Alcaraz's way. And I don't want that to be the case. Like, I want to have some sort of brilliant analysis. I want to be like, in the first 2 sets, this was happening, and then bang, that shifted around. And then this adjustment happened, and then Sinner technically started making this mistake, and Alcaraz started doing this. Guys, I want to be able to tell you all that stuff, but I didn't see that. Steve Flink didn't see it either. When I said, what was this about? Were there adjustments, or was this Alcaraz kind of just raising his performance level and Sinner making some mistakes on some big points? And it's the latter. So this is part of what made the comeback from Alcaraz so special. The fact that Jannik didn't completely gas out. Not that there was zero fatigue, which maybe some people have misinterpreted or I haven't communicated that well. I'm not saying there was zero fatigue. I'm saying there wasn't a level of fatigue that took Sinner out of the match and made him uncompetitive. That didn't happen. And there wasn't like a massive clear paradigm shift in the match. It was Alcaraz scrapping and clawing inch by inch to win 3 sets in a row. Yeah. It's fascinating, right? That every single one has basically a different story. So it's not that there's a pattern, it's actually the exact opposite, that they're all so different. Next one is from Atish Jams, I think. I love both Carlitos and Sinner, but isn't Carlitos winning the last 5 meetings also a consequence of Sinner being there to meet Carlitos when conditions and form are favoring Carlitos, but Sinner is always there? Don't you think results wouldn't be as skewed if Carlitos were to face in fast or indoor conditions? Is this an accurate representation of their rivalry? P.S. I was there when you called Carlitos to win a Grand Slam in 2022. Little bit of credit for some correct predictions for a change. I think two things are true. One, of the last 5 meetings, I don't think any of them have been in conditions that are above tour average surface speed. They have all been on the slower side. I do think that helps Alcaraz. But are conditions such a factor that it should completely skew this head-to-head, that it should consistently dictate outcomes in this particular head-to-head? I don't believe so. I don't think that we are going to look at this Sinner-Alcaraz rivalry 10 years down the road, and we are going to be looking at it in a similar light as Nadal-Federer, in which clay courts made the head-to-head uncompetitive. They just did. Or indoor hard courts made the head-to-head uncompetitive. Did Rafa ever beat Roger on an indoor hard court? That's a genuine question. I don't know. But obviously, if you compare the results, that's where the biggest gap is. So I don't think Sinner-Alcaraz is going to look like that, because I don't think they are as surface dependent in general. So I would not completely discount. You got to look at this nuanced. It's a shade of gray. I would not completely discount what we've seen in the head-to-head just because they've played on slower surfaces. I also wouldn't deny that that's a variable, and that's a variable that has helped Carlos. This is one thing, by the way, that I found really funny about the Sabalenka Gauff discourse. It's like any legitimate analyst who looked at that final was going to discuss how the wind affected the outcome. And the widespread response in the tennis world and in my comment section, let me just speak to my comment section. A very common response was, wait, I thought wind affects both players. What are we talking about here? Folks, wind is conditions. Conditions affect the play in one way or another. Oftentimes, they will favor one player or another based on style, based on tactics, based on strengths and weaknesses. I mean, is this so hard? Do we say after a match, well, why are we talking about the fact that it was on grass? It was grass for both players. No, we don't. You see how silly that sounds? So the whole it was windy for both players, what are we talking about? That doesn't say anything. Of course it matters that it was windy. Those are the conditions. Sabalenka, being the player who assumes a higher risk profile on a shot-by-shot basis, whose timing and precision needs to be more precise in order for her to implement her tennis. Of course the wind is a disadvantage for Sabalenka. We can't acknowledge that? Really? Sorry for that rant. All right. Next one from Amit Kumar. Hey, Gill, what are your thoughts on the crowd at RG final? I felt it was totally with Carlos. Do you think it impacted Sinner? Some of his shots were a clear sign of anxiety on big points stemming from crowd support Carlos was gaining. Do you think it will be a contributing factor in their rivalry as Carlos is much more popular, especially considering Sinner is someone not like Djokovic to use it in fueling himself? Look, I just don't know about that. You know, it's so easy to take the outcome of a match and to then to connect it with a factor such as the crowd in a way that is really hard to quantify. And I'm just mindful of the way discourse goes when it comes to something like this. Let's go back to the Wimbledon final in 2019. What if Federer converted one of those match points? What if? What would people have said? Would people have said, well, the crowd didn't affect Novak at all, but Roger won anyway? Roger won even though the crowd didn't affect No, that's not what they would have said. They would have said the crowd being pro-Roger was a massive help for Federer and a part of why the match went the way it did. But when Djokovic won, the narrative was, well, Djokovic wasn't affected by the crowd at all. How incredible was that? Amazing effort by Novak to not be affected by the crowd. And the fact is, Novak deserved the credit that he got for not being affected by the crowd. But the fact that the discourse is that fickle when it comes to the outcome of the match speaks to something being not quite right about all that. So I felt Sinner conducted himself on the court the same way he normally conducts himself on the court. I don't think he got distracted by the crowd. I didn't see that. I didn't see Yannick go on ultra, like, I don't know. Watching the match live, and this can be subjective, I didn't see any great evidence that Sinner was affected by the crowd. But just because it's a very pro-Carlos crowd and Carlos wins the match, it's very easy to just kind of go there. To say that the anxiety that Sinner felt was just because of the crowd, I mean, maybe it's because it's a major final, you know? And Sinner maybe lacking some of those reps under pressure based on him not playing all that many matches. Certainly not that many close matches. When's the last time he'd played a close match? He didn't deal with the pressure particularly well in the opening set in Rome either. Compounded by the fact that while I do think Sinner made some crucial mistakes, I don't think he was overcome with nerves on a consistent basis in a way in which I'm all that tempted to say Sinner's nerve management was a massive faulty feature in his performance. And that's what Steve and I, discussed, where there's levels to it. It's not as if you hit a button and it's either like, did he choke? Did he not choke? It's one or the other. Pick one. That's not how it is at all. There are levels to it, and Sinner falls somewhere in that spectrum of choking. There's no doubt about it. I just don't think it's all the way to the level that we sometimes see where a player is just unable to execute their game at any level for, on multiple points over and over again. Or a player completely changes their style or makes decisions that are completely out of character. Some of the things we sometimes see under pressure, if we go to the extremes, like from Davidovich Fokina, like when it's a big point, he just does some stupid stuff. And when you see that, it's like, okay, nerves. Or when you see Zverev stop hitting the ball with any pace or depth, it's like, okay, nerves. That's nerves. But for Sinner, there was nothing that was so evident. Yes, he made some mistakes on big points, but it was not so evident that he was overcome with nerves. From member video listener, you mentioned recently that Alcaraz had dealt with ups and downs and Sinner hadn't, but Alcaraz has barely lost any big matches and has not lost 5-setters. Meanwhile, Sinner has plenty of scar tissue, as you used to mention. 2 questions. A, do you think this loss could send Sinner into an Alcaraz-like tailspin? So far, he's not the type to lose for months after a close defeat. Let me just answer that before I get to your next one. Right now, the only thing I've seen from Sinner is absolute mental toughness, unflappability, and just a level of consistency week to week, no matter what is happening or what tournament he's playing in. So until Yannick proves otherwise, I'm going to assume that that's what it is with him. B, next question. What do you project Alcaraz's reaction will be after a major final defeat if that happens? Not wishing ill, but I'm curious because it's easy to smile when you're young and seemingly invincible, but as a matter of psychological growth, I want to see his reaction after a close/big loss. Well, hopefully he has learned some lessons from some of these big losses that he already has. Who's to say that Alcaraz didn't value that Olympic final just as much as a slam final? I kind of think he did. And the way he lost the Cincinnati final against Novak, yes, it's only Cincinnati, but first of all, he was very young and he might not have that perspective at the time. And also the way he lost was quite excruciating. And he has not dealt with the aftermath of those defeats all that well. The positive of that is that's all experience for a young player. Experience that you would hope he will learn from. So only time will tell. Next one is from member Lindsay. Hey, Gill, I've heard a lot about Novak being favored to go further at Wimbledon than he did at RG. Can you say more about exactly why that is? Will he get more out of his spot serving and +1 forehands? Will his flatter backhand do more damage on the slick surface? Does he like lower contact points? Yes. Yes to all of that. One dynamic that used to be at play is that his movement on grass was by far the best. By far the best. And he's still a very, very, very good mover on the grass. Maybe still the best. But probably not. But probably still up there. Because of his balance and his sliding, which is just impeccable on the surface. Mind-blowing. So that was one of the reasons where he seemed to be head and shoulders above the field for that stretch of, well, no, he's still on this remarkable run. I mean, he's in the final every year at Wimbledon. But nowadays, especially as he doesn't want to, he wants to rely on his offensive skill set and shorten points. Yes, the grass gives him a better ability to do that. But I think the fact that his backhand and the precision of his backhand and the precision of his serve. Let's talk about both his serve and his backhand together, because I actually think it's the same dynamic. When the ball hits the grass, it's not going to lose as much speed. So heaviness, speed of the ball, RPM on the ball, it's not as important. You don't need the speed and the spin to get the ball to move through the court quickly. Therefore, the speed and the spin isn't at as much of a premium. What is at a premium is accuracy. When you're attacking, how close to the line can you locate? And how, on your redirects, how precise can you be on those? When you're hitting forehands from the middle, how close to the lines can you play? Same thing for depth to some extent as well, when you talk about proximity to the baseline. So Novak, he doesn't have the biggest serve in the world, but he hits his spots. And it's the slice serve that actually stays low and skids through the grass. So the fact that it's not the speediest serve in the world, that's not punished on grass. It is punished a little bit on clay when the ball loses a lot of speed after the bounce, and somebody with a deep return position might be able to have the extra time to get to the ball, take a fuller cut, and get back into the point. Not the case on grass. But also with the backhand, which, again, just doesn't have the muscle that a forehand does, because he's able to be so precise with it, it becomes much easier for him to use the drive backhand to do damage through the court, to penetrate with that shot. And again, it's the precision and the accuracy off that wing that is world class that is going to be rewarded on the quicker surface. Next one is from Marshall. Hi, Gill. Am I the only one thinking surfaces are overrated? I mean, if a tennis player is great, he is great everywhere. It doesn't matter the surface. Obviously, a specific surface can be more effective for your game. But if you are great, how much of a difference is there among the surfaces? They said Sinner couldn't fit on clay. He proved us wrong. That Alcaraz was not great on hard. He won several trophies. Nadal would have won more on the other surfaces if it wasn't for Novak and Roger. I mean, surfaces change, but is this detail so important for a great tennis player? Thanks. Okay, so first let's acknowledge that this comment would have been blasphemous in the 90s. This comment would not have existed in the 90s or even the mid-2000s. But as I have talked about ad nauseum, this is the trend. Surfaces mattering less and less and less in the modern baseline game due to the power baseline style. And some homogenization of conditions. It is true that they are mattering less and less and less. As a result, they have become more marginal, more detail-oriented. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to stop talking about surfaces ever, because in a matchup such as Sinner versus Alcaraz, or in any matchup that is competitive, let's face it, we have two tennis players who are similar levels. And if the players are similar levels, details matter. Sinner won more total points. Details matter. What if he won 5 more total points? That could have been the difference. This is what we're talking about at the highest level. So, of course, we might talk about something that only makes a small difference, but it's still very, very important. What has changed is the fact that the best players in the world now will almost always be, unless they have certain quirks in their games. Medvedev has quirks. Mannarino has quirks. Let's go the opposite way. Let's talk about, okay, Rude has quirks in his game. As far as like the spin profile on not just his forehand, but also his backhand. Spinniest backhand, probably also the spinniest forehand. Plays with more height than anybody else. That's a quirk. The guys who don't live on the extremes are not going to be as affected as much surface to surface to surface. It's why the big three won on all 3 surfaces. It's why Serena won on all 3 surfaces. It is why future elite players will win on all 3 surfaces. And it is why Pete Sampras's 14 is going to get passed over and over and over again for that reason and because of longevity. I try to tell you guys this. I try to tell you. Pete wasn't winning Roland Garroses. That was the time. That meant he only had 3 opportunities every year. Those were the times. Then there's the longevity factor. But I was saying this with Sinner all of last year. Blue in the face. When I picked Sinner to win Roland Garros, I was like, there was a lot of pushback about him not being good on clay. And I'm like, this is not how it's going to work. Like, Sinner's going to be fine on clay. So I think we've come around to that. From Roberto KB. Gill, not a question, but a comment on your thoughts on Fonseca and level-setting expectations after the Draper loss. You have mentioned this before, but I think it's worth refreshing. Here is the year-end ranking for the first full tour season, i.e. the first season with more main tour matches than Challenger for some players. Djokovic 05, 78. Nadal 04, 51. Federer 99, 64. Alcaraz 2021, 32. Sinner 2020, 37. Wow, ELO rating was sky high, though, for some of these guys. So, ELO, in this case, with all of them, ELO actually saw that they were better than their ranking suggested. Right now, Fonseca, live ranking 56, ELO ranking 23. Good stuff. Good numbers. Okay, so this comment goes on to say, Fonseca's season is entirely on track with this comparison group. The highest year-end ranking in this sample is around 30. Round 3 at Slams corresponds to round of 32, so the 32 best players are left. Reaching the round of 32 at any event where the draw has full strength of the tour, i.e. typically Masters and Slams, should be considered entirely satisfactory for Joao's 2025, and anything more than that is just a bonus. Yeah. Them, the facts. What do I have to add? So the reason I didn't go over this after the Draper loss is because this is what I did after the Sonego loss at the Australian Open, and I just didn't want to be repetitive with my analysis. So that's why I didn't go over all this, but I'm sure plenty of folks will be listening and watching right now who don't remember that, and it's a good refresher, and it's a really important point. And let's not gloss over the fact that Fonseca's played 2 majors in his career, and he's beaten seeded players both times. And you're going to tell me that there is some general sentiment of disappointment? Like, does that make any sense? I don't think so. From Austin, hi Gill. It seems in every slam, at some point during a lull in a given match, some commentator brings up the cursed suggestion that best of 5 matches are too long and that the men should play best of 3 slam matches instead. I don't remember who it was this time, but someone on TNT suggested, quote, it's going to happen at some point. I find this idea atrocious, and if it ever did happen, my personal interest in following tennis would be reduced enormously. Best of 5 is the pinnacle of the men's sport, and it would be a sadder world without it. I don't need to bring up this year's final as proof of this, but I just did. Speaking in the short term to medium term, let's say the next 20 years, do you agree that getting rid of best of 5 is going to happen at some point? If so, what steps do you think could be taken to ruin the sport further after this? Might I suggest 1, one serve only, 2, an ace wins the game outright, 3, a fault loses the game outright, and 4, any rallies going longer than 5 shots are canceled and both players are awarded a point. Are you think they're going to give up basically participation trophies for rallies over 5 shots? Like, great job, both of you guys. Let's give a point each way. No, I don't think it's inevitable that they're going to get rid of best of 5. Like, what stakeholder actually wants that? I can't think of one. Now, there are certain aspects of broadcast television that become tricky due to the unpredictable nature of the timing of tennis. For example, network television, at least in the United States, has very strict scheduling with things such as live shows and local and national news, and therefore it is quite difficult for the networks to show tennis on TV. Even though the networks are the most widely distributed television stations that there are, it's a lot easier for a basic cable channel like TNT to show tennis because they are not as restricted about the shows that they, their programming schedule is not quite as restrictive. But other than that, time is money. More time that you get to be on the air, more sessions that you get to sell tickets, and that is, satisfactory based on the amount of time that elapses. More time in front of the eyes of, more eyeball time for sponsors. I don't know what stakeholders would advocate for this. And the idea that attention spans are too short for best of 5 and that changing a best of 3 would grow the sport is such baloney bogus. It just is. The idea that changing to best of 3 would grow the sport, I am sorry, but there is not one soul, not a soul, who turns on a tennis match and chooses not to watch because it's best of 5, but had it been best of 3, would make the decision to watch. In other words, the people who aren't watching tennis, men's tennis, best of 5, those people, I assure you that changing to best of 3 will not bring those people in. I am 1,000% positive. Think about the people in your life. Do a little experiment. Say, hey, John. Hey, buddy John. Hey, friend Sarah. I know you normally don't watch tennis, but this match is best of 3, so you want to kick it? Want to kick it with me? Let's watch some tennis. Best of 3. They're going to be like, huh? No, I don't like tennis. I don't care if it's best of 3 or best of 5. So the way to bring new fans in is to do a million other things that can help bring new fans in. But the last among them is to try to change to best of 3 and act as if that's going to grow the sport somehow. That is a crazy, crazy idea, in my opinion. From Steven. Hey, Gill, can we please get a deep dive on Lorenzo Musetti, young and electric player who's really starting to come into form? What do you think his ceiling is from what we've seen so far? Perennial top 10 player, slam winner, etc.? Well, he's on a great trajectory that I think puts him on track to become kind of an opportunity tier 2 player. So I don't know that I ever see Musetti as a slam winner in the sense that he's so good it's inevitable that it's going to happen. But I think we've discussed this, especially if there's only going to be 2 in Sinner and Alcaraz, and it's not going to be, a fortress of 4 like we saw over the course of one era, because Murray was such a nightmare to deal with for the rest of the field as well. Where a guy like Musetti, if you make yourself the 4th best player in the world and you stay there for 5 years, something might just happen. Like, something might break your way and you might have a chance to do it. In fact, you probably will. If you're the 4th best player in the world for like 5 years in a row, it's probably going to break your way at some point. Not saying that it's a given or that it's going to be easy for Musetti to do something like that. But, I am really impressed. I don't want to say he's completely surpassed my expectations, because I always thought that this was possible for him, but I just felt like it would be he would have to overcome such obstacles, being a player with a one-handed backhand who is reliant on breaking serve consistently. And I haven't seen that work on tour in a long time, right? Federer was not reliant on breaking consistently. He was an elite holder of serve. Tsitsipas in his top 5 days was an elite holder of serve. Stan was a little bit of a hybrid, wasn't he? So I guess Stan was kind of in the middle. Good return game, good serve game. Neither one was like tops. Team is an interesting case. I mean, he was good on fast courts, but I think because of the return limitations, he struggled on grass. He struggled on the quickest hard courts, even though he had his moments at the ATP finals. He developed, he developed the block return, and he got good at shortening up the forehand return. Anyway, I thought that'd be tough for Musetti, just how hard everything is. And a couple of things have happened. One, Musetti has developed physically so well. So the fact that so many of the points are hard for Musetti, physically difficult, he has started to deal with that really, really well because of his physicality. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that the first serve is a bigger weapon. The forehand, though, is a much better offensive weapon that he has gotten comfortable going after. And that's been a big difference for him. He is really clear-headed on his backhand and how he needs to play it. His focus and compete level has gotten really good. That was not the case when he was young. He was pretty inconsistent with his focus level. He would have a lot of dips in matches. He wasn't always the most competitive also when he hit adversity. So a lot of things have gotten really good for Musetti, but he's just kind of you can't teach a lot of the stuff he does. He's a defensive genius, and the way he feels out his variety is pretty genius. Definitely better on the natural surfaces because of the backhand slice, because of the extra time on the drive backhand. So hard courts are the worst surface for his backhand. There's no doubt about that. And probably also the worst surface for his return of serve. But it's just been great to see him play great ball. I'm not going to go any deeper than that. After all, it is a mailbag, and we got to keep this moving. In fact, I don't think I can go much longer. Here's one from member Pete. Hey, Gill, after watching Sasha Zverev's passive play versus Djokovic in the RG quarterfinal, I actually got the sense that Zverev's pessimism about his own game, I'm referencing his comments after losing this year's Aussie Open final, might have something to it. I hope I'm wrong, though. I mean, how epic would it be if Sasha went on a magical run to win a slam after all the ups and downs in his career? Yeah, I do think that his comments, his self-deprecation, have something to do, maybe not with the passivity, because I've seen the passivity all throughout his career, and there are technical aspects to it, along with the fact that he's just clearly always had bad nerve management. Again, what has stood out to me in the Australian Open final and this match against Djokovic is the lack of fight. And that is where I think the negative thoughts have clearly come into play, because I never used to see that with Zverev. And I think down 2-0, he still could have beaten Sinner. If he won that third set, I don't think Jannik Sinner was his best physically whatsoever. He had the match against Rune where he was very sick. He had wobbles, like physical wobbles in the semis, I believe in the third set. I just don't think Jannik was in great physical shape. And Zverev had a chance to get him into deep waters potentially, and just didn't compete in the third set, where he should have been saying, let's just get this one. And he couldn't do it. And then against Djokovic, like I thought the fire completely went out after the second set. It just didn't look like he was fully digging in. And that to me is him saying, I'm not good enough. I can't win. And it takes away his competitive edge. From Gabamini. Hello, Gill. Are there any downsides to Sinner's new Nishikori-esque return? I am hearing everywhere that this is a really good change by Jannik, but surely there is a con to adopting a return style like this. Otherwise, why isn't the whole tour doing it? Well, first of all, props to you. Oops, that's the next one. Props to you on your critical thinking. Your good logic here, because you are absolutely correct. Anything that the entire tour is doing has some trade-offs. And for this one, it would be the timing of your split step is absolutely crucial. And because Sinner has added a timing element, you are now creating more moving parts ahead of your split step. And therefore, arguably, more can go wrong as far as the timing of your split step is concerned. And that is why someone like Novak might say, no, I'm really not into that because I want to be on point timing my split step every time. But clearly, some guys are able to make it work. Again, you guys know the list. Players who return that way: David Ferrer, Andy Murray, Kei Nishikori, Gill Gross. That's right. They're all in there. Great returners, each and every one of them. Next one is from Anonymous Tennis Follower. Hi, Gill. The tournament has received substantial blowback this RG for not putting women's matches in the night session because it is being perceived as further entrenching gender inequality. What are your thoughts on it? Some points that are worth taking note of. One, Gauff mentioned in her press conference that women would rather finish their matches in the day than late into the night. Is it worth remembering that the tournament got a lot of criticism last year for having Djokovic play late into the night? Men play best of 5, women play best of 3, and if there's only one night session match, might as well choose best of 5. Third, Petkovic wrote on her Substack that her issue is not with the last match of the day, but the first. She pointed out that 97% of the first matches of the day are women's, and that tends to be the time when most of the French crowd hasn't arrived and Americans like you haven't woken up. Another question I have, ignore this if you wish. Early on in the tournament, Swiatek said she did not have an issue with women's matches not being put on night sessions, and she got criticized by people who say that because of her position of influence in the sport, she ought to be an ambassador for women's tennis and is thus obligated to advocate for putting women's matches at night. Is this criticism warranted? Can I just start with Iga? Let me start with Iga because it was the end of your comment. I was just kind of like, she really can't think larger than when she likes to play a match. So that was interesting to me. That's just the mentality of a tennis player, right? I say this all the time when it comes to conditions, when it comes to rules. Like, these people are all living in their own bubble of what is going to help them win. And that is what they care about. Do I think it would have been cool for Swiatek to be like, hey, here's my opinion on the situation outside of when I prefer to play? Yeah, maybe. But also, I think didn't she clarify her comments when she was kind of pressed further? I think so. I think she did. Okay, so this situation has been going on now for 3 years running. I kind of ignored it on the first mailbag which was Monday, because I'm like, are we gonna do this every year? I say my opinion every year, but Petkovic's thing is very relevant. So let's start there. The argument that the FFT put the women at night because of best of 5 actually has some logic to it. It actually makes some sense, but it completely falls apart like a deck of cards and is rendered absolutely 100,000% invalid based on the way the FFT does the rest of the scheduling. Clearly, the priority is men's tennis. I am sorry. Clearly, it doesn't matter what Maresmo says. Not even up for debate. Men's tennis is the priority in the way they schedule. That is why women play in the morning and men play in the afternoon. Time and time again. Like, even on those quarterfinal days when you had, you have 2 women's matches in the morning, the men's match third on, and then you have the men's match at night. Like, that's how they're scheduling it. So, like, make no mistake. Make no mistake. And that's why, like, you can say, well, it's just best of 3, best of 5. And it's like, well, we know that's not true because of how you do the rest of the schedule. Now, the next part of this is, okay, knowing that they give priority scheduling to the men, where do we go from here? I think 2 things are true. I have heard, I don't know firsthand, but I have heard from multiple sources that it's a cultural thing. That in France, men's tennis is prioritized. That the crowds do prefer men's tennis. And like Chrissy Everett, I believe, tells a story. I think it was Chrissy. And she said when she was close to finishing a match, she always thought that the crowd was rooting hard for her because they would get really into it at the end and they would start cheering for her. And eventually she realized that the French crowd, and this didn't happen anywhere else in the world, but the French crowd was actually cheering for her to finish the match because Borg was going to play McEnroe coming up next. So if it is ingrained, if it is part of their culture, I think 2 things are true. 1, everybody has the right to criticize it. Everybody has the right to say they don't like it, it's unequal, it's not fair, it's not right. No matter what country you're in, you have the right to criticize it and say, I don't agree with it. They also have the right to run their tournament how they want to run their tournament. So both things are true. They can schedule how they want. Other people on the outside can say, I think that's wrong. And that's going to be how it is. That's just it. At the U.S. Open, my observation is that there's no disparity in the popularity between men's and women's tennis in terms of the crowds and the draws. And the U.S. Open schedule is 50-50 equal. I don't see any favoritism, and I don't see the crowds in any way favoring the men or the women. And I've been to the U.S. Open every single day for the last, 4 years. Yeah. So there's also the obvious and easy and clear solution of just adjusting the schedule so that you can sell 2 matches for the night session like everybody else. And put 1 women's match, 1 men's match, and you get over that whole PR thing. By the way, before I move on, I guess this is a multifaceted issue. The TV rights for the night matches in France are separate from the TV rights for all the day matches. I believe Amazon has the night match, and TNT Europe or Eurosport, Eurosport has the rest of it, I believe, something like that. Well, in my experience, the TV partners have the most influence out of anybody else in terms of schedule, in terms of how the schedule goes. There is nobody who has more influence over the tournament because there is nobody who pays the tournament more than the TV partners, the media partners. Just throwing that out there, it is possible that Amazon is like, hey, we want men's matches, and Maresmo can't throw them under the bus. FFT can't throw them under the bus. They can't be like, they would be horrible business partners if they were like, yeah, sorry guys, it's Amazon's fault. Just saying, it's possible. It is. If Amazon's like, hey, we sell more ads on average in a best of 5 match because there are more commercial breaks, which is true. There are more commercial breaks in a best of 5. Maybe Amazon wants the best of 5. Going to throw that out there. But I completely understand the disdain for how the scheduling all goes. And it is especially rough in the United States because you really do miss everybody kind of misses the women's tennis because it happens so early, especially on the West Coast. All right, from Nadal brought me to tennis. Hi, Gill. Enjoyed your content during RG. After this latest Sinner Alcaraz final, how would you describe the nature and potential impact of the mental scar tissue for Sinner with regards to his 5-set losses and losses against Alcaraz? And would you rate these two issues as more or less serious than Zverev's no slam issues? Thanks as always. For me, no contest, not comparable. Might it get to Sinner a little bit that he's lost so many in a row against Alcaraz? Might it be tougher to close? Like, might there be more pressure on him the next time he plays Carlos, particularly if it's at like a 1,000 or a 500? I think the meaning to Sinner is just going to be very elevated, which might help him, might not. Completely different from Zverev because Sinner knows darn well he's going to beat Alcaraz in the future. It's going to happen for him. I don't think those doubts or those negative voices are going to be all that loud in his head at this stage. 5-setters, he'll explain that away. He'll be like, yeah, my endurance used to stink, so I lost a bunch of 5-setters, but I'm good now. All good in the hood at this point. Easy for him in his head to explain away. For Zverev, it's a completely different thing. This is career-defining. This is legacy-defining. He's been up 2-1 twice. He's served for it once. He has not performed well in any of the 3. He's getting up there in age. There are parts of his game that he just doesn't trust in these moments. It's a million times worse for Zverev. I wouldn't compare the two. From Geezer, also from the Discord. Hey, Gil, thanks for the excellent RG coverage. Your analysis focused predominantly on the 4th and 5th sets. I was hoping to get your thoughts on how/why Sinner went up 2 sets to love and what changed in sets 3 and 4 to Alcaraz to allow Alcaraz to wrestle control back. Well, I think had Sinner won, we would have talked a lot about the rally ball pace and the depth that he was maintaining that dragged Carlos into the slugfest. Just he clearly didn't feel like he could incorporate his variety that much because he was getting kind of rushed into going toe-to-toe, in my eyes. The running forehand, massive improvement for Sinner. It came up huge for Jannik. When Alcaraz was clearly trying to pull him wide as much as possible, Sinner responded out of that corner in some big spots. And one of the big points that really sticks out, although I think the tiebreak score was 6-3, was second set tiebreak, that 6-3 point. Yes, he had some cushion to work with, but still. I think we would have talked about the level of play for Alcaraz, end of the first set, start of the second set, being pretty disappointing. You know, him getting pretty error prone for that portion of play. Was it because he got something in his eye and lost focus? Maybe. But, you know, again, that 4-5 service game, he misses 3 first balls. We would have been talking about that a little bit more. Oh, and the return of serve. The return was huge for Sinner. Sinner won the second set with his return, pretty much, because he was punishing on it. He was swinging big, and he was not letting Alcaraz take control because there was much more intention with the first serve return. So I think it was the forcefulness of Jannik, the running forehand holding up, the return of serve, making Alcaraz pay for missed spots or lapses in serve level every single time. A steadier, kind of more consistent level from the back of the court. Alcaraz's forehand was a lot more temperamental. And those were the big factors. All right, I want to get to this one. I know we've already talked about the serve, but this comment had 24 likes, so I should hit it. Hi, Gill. I am a huge Sinner fan and really disappointed by his loss. One common pattern in his losses is his first serve percentage plunging in these matches. What would be the possible reasons? Is it because of the extensive rallies he has to do with Carlos and it tires him, in which it reflects in the serve? Secondly, I feel like Sinner is hesitant coming to the net when he gets his opponent stretched. I know he is not someone like Zverev or Rublev, but he's also not someone like Djokovic or Nadal coming forward. I feel this is an area of his game he needs to work on. It will also help him in conserving energy, I feel, which will eventually reflect in his first serve dynamics. With Cahill leaving his team, who would be the best people/coaches to encourage him to improve his aspect of his game? I feel this is what is keeping him back in this rivalry. What are your thoughts? Sorry for the long question rant. Love your work. Thanks for those kind words. Well, first of all, yeah, I think this is part of it. Like, I think Sinner's, I talked about this with Steve Flink. I think Sinner needs to continue to work on his offensive repertoire, and he needs to try to get to a point where he renders Alcaraz's defense a little bit more helpless than he's currently able to. Because once Carlos gets used to that pace, and he's able to drift way back behind the baseline and absorb that power, kind of go into shock absorbing mode, it is kind of difficult for Sinner to finish, and sometimes it feels like it takes a lot for Jannik. And yeah, I think opening up the court a little bit more, trusting the drop shot a little bit more, trusting the net rushing a bit more, I think that's an area where Jannik can make some gains. Is the serve because the legs are tired? I don't know. I mean, I would maybe want to look at, is the percentage going down as the matches progress? I'd want to look at things like that. I'm not sure. But look, overall, I agree with this point. Who's the best coach to get that done? Here's what I'll say. I think Cahill and Vignosi have done a great job of developing that part of Sinner's game. So whatever they are doing, they need to keep doing it. But I will say, here's what Jannik maybe could do a little better. In matches he's going to win, try stuff. Be a little bit more, do a little bit more experimentation and get your reps in matches you know you're going to win. And maybe it makes him a little bit less ruthless, but it's probably worth it. And Novak does that a lot. Like, Novak is going to toy around with stuff, especially later in his career. And maybe Sinner just stays into the comfort zone a little bit too much. And then suddenly when it's time to play Zverev or Medvedev or Djokovic or Alcaraz, now suddenly we're trying stuff. Well, maybe we should make sure to try stuff a little bit early on. All right, I think I'm done. I'm just going to scroll through questions pretty quickly and see if there's anything major that I'm missing. All right, here's what I'll do. Let's rapid fire here. I mean, really rapid fire. And for that reason, any question that was long, I'm not going to be able to get to. Where would Thiem be in this conversation if not for his early end to his career? How would he compete against our current top 6 players. Thank you, Gill. If you even see this, well, of course I'm going to see it. I don't think Thiem was ever destined to be an all-time great. I think it was too difficult for him to get to that elite level. It took a lot of work for him to get there, and I think no matter what happened, he was only going to be able to stay there for 2-3 years. It was shortened, a little shorter than I thought, but it was always going to be short, in my opinion. From Samantha. After the RG finals, Sinner and Alcaraz clearly showed their levels above the rest of the tour. How do you think the rest of the tour feels when watching this? Do you think it's discouraging to watch the level of competition at the very top, or is it motivation to eventually challenge them? It depends who you are. If you're Djokovic, it's discouraging because you don't have much time left and you're probably not getting better at this point. If you're Zverev, it's discouraging. If you're Medvedev, it's discouraging. If you're Tsitsipas, it's discouraging. These guys are in their primes. Right now is go time. If you're Fils, it's motivating. If you're Draper, it's motivating. Fonseca, Menchik, Rune, hopefully, maybe. He's in a bit of a different position because he's not really on that steady up right now. For those guys, Shelton, I want to put in there. For those guys, it's a measuring stick. Okay, that's the standard. That's my target. We're doing everything we can to get there. And I think it helps everybody develop. So for them, it's motivating. For everybody else, it's discouraging. Hi, Gil. Do you think the underarm serve will become widely used? To me, it seems like a very sensible solution to discourage ultra-defensive, extremely deep return positions, and I think it should become something more pros experiment with more and more. Here's my nuanced take. First serve, I don't really like it. I don't like it because it's hard to disguise. You never have the returner off balance. They're always on balance and ready to move forward. And at the end of the day, you're still very far away for a drop shot. You have to stand behind the baseline. So for those reasons, I don't love it for a first serve. For a second serve, when guys are really, really far back, then I do like it. Because now I'm not giving up as much. My first serve, when I surrender my first serve, I'm giving up a ton. I'm literally handing over the biggest weapon in tennis, the hardest shot in tennis, and I'm saying, yeah, pass. I'm going to drop shot. And that's a tough sell for me. But if my opponent is on the back fence and I have a second serve, which I can only hit 90, 100 miles per hour and start the point, now I'm really seriously considering, can I do more damage and be more disruptive with an underarm serve? All right, all the other comments are too long for the rapid fire, so I'm going to leave it there. Thank you, everybody, for following along throughout Roland Garros coverage. Really appreciate the support, the really awesome numbers. You guys know what to do. Like the video, subscribe, leave a review, Apple, Spotify, all that. Share with your friends. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.